On this episode of Coding 101, we're finishing up Santa's Little Helper.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust. This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Coding 101 is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com. Hi, this is Leo Laporte, and if you'd like to help us design our new website, I invite you to visit twit.to/navtest. We've got 8 quick questions we'd like to ask you that will help us make the navigation easier to use. That's twit.to/navtest. Thanks a lot.
This episode of Coding 101 is brought to you by FreshBooks, the simple cloud accounting solution that helps millions of entrepreneurs and small business owners save time billing and get paid faster. Join over 5 million users running their business with ease. Try it free at freshbooks.com/C101. And by Mandrill. Mandrill is a scalable, reliable, and secure email infrastructure service trusted by more than 300,000 customers. Sign up at mandrill.com, promo code TWIT, and you'll receive 50,000 free email sends per month for your first 6 months of service. Welcome to Coding 101. It's the Twitch show where we let you into the wonderful world of the Code Monkey. I'm Father Robert Ballecer, the digital Jesuit, and joining me today, my code warrior, my cohort, my good friend, Mr. Lou Maresca, senior software engineer at Microsoft. Lou, thank you so very much for coming back.
Thanks for having me. Hopefully I won't scare you with my my cold voice that I have today.
Yeah, you're having all sorts of issues. Your body has some sort of virus. Your computer has issues, and you just crashed our Skype.
Yeah, remotely. Somehow I crashed your Skype. I have talent.
Go figure. Well, before we get into Santa's Little Helper, let's go ahead and take a look at an item that I thought programmers around the world probably should take a closer look at. This one comes to us from a blog by Kevin Williams called The 10 Things That Annoy Programmers the Worst. Now, it's funny, whenever we get one of these top 10 lists, there's always going to be people that have differing opinions, but these 10 are really good. The number 10 was comments that say nothing. Now, Lou, both of us know this, right? I mean, we tell people comment, but there's a difference between a comment that helps and a comment that just leaves you going, okay, now what?
It's a holy war almost with comments in code. I mean, a lot of people like to over-comment, and sometimes I like over-commenting more than I like vague commenting.
Yeah.
Because if you don't comment, and then some people, the ones that do the best actually write a design document that talks about and puts little links into the code, so you can go look at the code comments too, and that's even better. But code commenting is super important, so you know exactly what a piece of code is doing and what it's meant to do and what its purpose is to do. And then if it's breaking or not doing what it's supposed to, then at least you know the original intent.
I had to work on a project, maybe a year ago, and all the comments were, this is a loop, this is a counter, this resets the counter. I'm like, well, yeah, but why is it there? That's what that's all about. Number 9 is being interrupted by coding. I kind of thought this was just petty, but then I thought about it, and it's kind of true. Programmers tend to be the kind of people who get into a zone. It takes a while to get into the zone. You know this. You might be staring at your screen for the longest time thinking about how you're going to do something, and then you start feeling it, and you start pumping out code, and it's all good. And then someone comes in and they bother you, and it's normally something that's just lame, it's stupid. They're wandering around, they're asking a dumb question. And I think this applies. Are you like that? Do you hate it when people bother you when you're in the zone?
So I don't hate it because, in fact, sometimes I have to literally, in fact, right now I have locked my office door and there's a sign on the door that says do not disturb. But sometimes I have to do that because if I don't do that, I'm doing something, I'm thinking about something, I haven't written notes about it to kind of keep context. And so then somebody interrupts and I'm like, okay, I got to answer them and be nice. I talk to them and I come back and I'm like, okay, now what the heck was I doing? And so I think that happens all the time. So I think, and I haven't seen a tool today that can fix it, whether it's Link or Skype or whatever communication device you use that I can put that I'm busy on there. Unless I lock the door, pull my shades down, and turn the lights out, I'm pretty much open for business.
Right. This next one, number 8, this is near and dear to my heart. Scope creep or mission creep. And we all know this. This is that idea that as the project progresses, they're just going to start adding on requirements, features that they'd like, or they see something in another application and they go, oh, you know what? Our program should do that too, with no regard for the fact that that might completely change what you were doing with the code. Of course, you've never run into anything like this, right?
No, never. We don't have that problem every day that I work here at all either. Yeah. But one of the biggest things that you'll see is there's an old saying, there's an acronym called MVP, Most Viable Product. And that's one of the things that startups are push very hard to do, is ship a very simple thing up front, let users complain and ask for things and then add to it. But companies, whether it's Microsoft, Apple, Google, they never do that. And so there's always scope creep that come in and force the release dates out.
Yeah. Well, my favorite is the scope or the feature creep that happens, and then they expect you not to change the release date. Because, I mean, we're just asking you to add 3D features, right? I mean, that's like 2-3 lines of code. What? The next thing, I think this gets a little bit whiny, because this happens for everyone. This is not just coders. But having a project manager who does not code and who does not understand or doesn't care about understanding what programmers actually do. This still does exist. You won't find this a lot at companies that are well run, but having a programming manager who cannot program it's torturous. Lou, have you experienced that?
So there's different levels of program managers. So here at Microsoft, we have what we call the domain experts and then the technical leads. And so like the domain experts are ones like, for instance, I work in financial software or business software. So ones that might understand sales and financials and general ledger and accounting. Those are actually still fairly good PMs that can understand the domain expertise around calculation and so on, but they might not necessarily understand how I'm coding it or the technology behind it. And so there's a little bit of a crutch there. But they're still fairly good PMs. And so it all depends on if you're a domain expert, if you're a technical expert, and what your project requires. And sometimes it requires both. And so that they're at a kind of a loss at that point.
Right. Number 6 and number 5 are interesting because they're kind of the same thing, but not. Number 6 was listed as being asked to document our own code. And number 5 is working on code that is not documented. And I think this is absolutely a truism. I hate documenting my code. I know I have to do it, and I end up doing it because I felt the pain of not having it, but I don't want to do it, and sometimes people have to ask me to do it, and yet, on the other side, if I find code that's not documented to my liking, I think that programmer is the worst thing ever.
Yeah, I mean, Microsoft requires what we call a white paper. So like when you do a project, you have to write a white paper about it too, and it's like, you kind of remember the old engineering English classes I had to take in college and thinking, man, I could have used a little bit more of those because I literally have to write a document that customers have to read about my code. And it's sometimes difficult to do, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Number 4 is an interesting one because I'm more of a hardware guy, but hardware generated faults, specifically errors that are generated because we're running code, especially like beta code on janky hardware, is a pet peeve. And I've actually seen this happen a lot where we're running on pre-release hardware and we get change logs back saying, well, it doesn't work on XXY that's going to be released next year. I'm thinking, well, is that a finished version? Then why do I care? You know, if you can't show me something that they say is stable, why am I going to change my code to accommodate them? Number 3, vagueness. You know this one. In fact, anyone who's in IT knows this one. You don't have to be a programmer. That idea of, it's broken. Well, what's wrong with it? It just doesn't work right. Okay, can you tell me what happened? It didn't do what I wanted it to do. That's, yeah, you see that a lot, I think. No, you're kind of, I'll just leave you with that one. Number 2, other people. I think programmers, as a rule of thumbs, we don't like other programmers. we may understand that other programs are necessary, but Lou, and again, I'm going to throw you on the tracks here. Do you sometimes feel as if the world would be better if everyone just programmed like you?
You know, honestly, I'm going to be honest with you. So I'm only stay on teams if I have somebody who's better than I am.
There we go. Okay.
And that's the truth. And so it makes me better anyways. So I mean, if I'm not on a team that I can learn from somebody, then I normally jump off that team. So that's the rule that I follow, and that's the one that I have. But I do agree, there are some times where you work with programmers, they just don't have the skill. They maybe are just kind of just getting started and they cause some issues, they cause some delays, and it does cause some problems with our code too. So it's a kind of a balancing act.
And the number one from this posting, and yeah, this is true, my code. 6 months later, I think every programmer has had this moment where they'll look back at a program, a project that they started, and they'll go, what was I thinking? This is not elegant. This is not good. I should rewrite all of this. Of course, this happens a lot, but never at the corporate level, right, Lou?
Honestly, I've had emails from people. So I've been here 11 years. I've had emails from people that'll come be like, you wrote this, can you help us fix this? And it's like 11-year-old code. So I have that all the time. Don't worry about that.
Yeah. Now, other potentials that weren't listed in the blog, actually my number 4 was that exactly. Answering questions about my code, especially if it's code I can't remember. I almost feel shame whenever someone says, your code is breaking this and we don't know why. You wrote this, can you tell us what it does? And I normally don't have an answer. I also hate code repositories with really, really bad revision keeping that tend to want us to fork projects. That's been a pet peeve of mine. One other thing is, and I've seen this in the Valley recently, star programmers, superstar programmers who are brought into a project who don't seem to ever want to program. They do all the high-level thinking, and then they leave it to the peons to turn that into code. What pet peeves do you have, Lou?
I think that is one of them. So like one of them where like they'll come up with a really, really complex design. They never communicate with the team, and then they go and say, here's design, go and code it. And then you really have no idea where to even start. I think that's the first one that I have, especially with teams. And the second one, the last one would be if I go to a developer and they wrote the code, but there's no comments, there's no tests, it doesn't even necessarily compile sometimes. And you ask them what they were even thinking, and they have no idea. And so there's those two things, obviously, that could cause some huge blips on a project, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Well, Lou, we're going to try to stay away from all of those errors when we get back into Santa's Little Helper. Today, we're going to be finishing up the project. People have received all the code and all the code snippets that they need to be able to access those APIs from Best Buy and maybe Newegg, do a little bit of screen scraping, if you will. But today, you're going to show them how to wrap all of that in a nice UI. Am I right?
That's right, yeah. And we're also going to go and show you how to use what we call SQLite or a local database to save the data so that when you open the app every time, you don't always have to go and get the data, and it can kind of show historical data as well.
Fantastic. But before we get to that, let's go ahead and take a break for our first sponsor. Now, if you run a small business, if you run an SMB, if you run it out of your home, or if you are an upstart who's looking for a little bit of help, but you still like that pioneering spirit, there's nothing like a helping hand with finances. That's why we're happy to welcome FreshBooks to Coding 101. Now, what is FreshBooks? FreshBooks is the cloud accounting software designed from the ground up for entrepreneurs and small businesses. I've actually used this in a couple of our organizations around the country whenever they need billing. Now, billing is troublesome, and it normally requires an accountant, and you've always got errors when you're entering in numbers. Not with FreshBooks. What FreshBooks allows you to do is to, generate professional-looking invoices, to automatically bill customers, and to automatically enter in numbers into your accounting software. In other words, it's like having an accounting department in the cloud. FreshBooks is built for a growing business, and on average, FreshBooks customers double their revenue in the first 24 months and get paid an average of 5 days faster. Figure that, 5 days extra with the cash that you deserve. Are you still using Word or Excel or Google Docs to create invoices? I'll admit, I was doing that for the longest time. Well, FreshBooks is the easiest way to create professional-looking invoices in minutes, so you don't get an invoice that looks like it was scribbled on the back of a piece of paper. Now, you get to avoid those awkward emails and phone calls to your late-paying clients. Oh, hey, I sent you that bill 90 days ago. Could you get your department to work on it? No, because FreshBooks does it for you. They have automated late payment reminders that let you set a way to get paid on time, worry-free. Now, you can set up recurring profiles so you can put your billing on autopilot, and FreshBooks customers spend less time on paperwork, freeing up to 2 days per month to focus on the work that they love instead of the numbers that they detest. Do you still keep your receipts stuffed in your wallet to keep track of expenses? Do you snap photos of receipts right after your phone and instantly capture expenses? Well, that's what FreshBook is for. It lets you record billable hours and track your time with multiple rates. FreshBooks integrates with your apps like Google Apps, PayPal, Stripe, MailChimp, Fundbox, Zen Payroll. FreshBooks even has an open API so developers can integrate with the FreshBooks platform and make everything nice and neat. If you ever need help, you'll talk to a real person every time. FreshBooks' award-winning support is ready to help, and software is free forever. Now, Amber MacArthur of BNN's App Central says FreshBook Mobile allows me to quickly send invoices and check in on my business no matter where I am. There's no reason for you to not try it. Now, here's what we want you to do. We want you to try FreshBooks free for 30 days with no obligation and see if maybe it helps change the way that you do business. Go to freshbooks.com/C101 and enter Coding 101 in the How Did You Hear About Us section when signing up. Start your 30-day free trial today. Go to freshbooks.com/C101. And don't forget to enter Coding 101 in the How Did You Hear About Us section to, throw some support to Coding 101. We thank FreshBooks for their support of this episode of Coding 101. Lou, let's go ahead and get into the nitty-gritty. Now, we have given all of our audience the code so they can access the APIs of these different vendors and look for a particular product. But that's just the start. That just gives us the back end. That just gets the information into our software. But as we learned from previous modules, we still need a way to present that view to the user that is, well usable. Where do we start?
So I think we should start from kind of like a bottom-up approach. So we basically talked about the providers that we were able to go get the data. So if you show my screen really quick, in the projects, you have several providers. I gave you an Amazon, Best Buy, Newegg, Sam's Club, Target, Walmart provider. By the way, there was a bug in the Walmart provider, and I'm sorry about that. So I actually did fix it, and we'll give you the latest code to get that fixed. But these will all just get the data, they'll return it back, and then you just get this big blob of data. So I think that in the project, we gave you a console app that basically allowed you to copy and paste a URL in there, and then you would run it, and it would go and get the data, and it would output for all the different providers, Newegg, Samsung, whatever. The key here is the whole idea to this app is for you to be able to track prices, maybe even cross retailers. Right. And so the way to do that is you want to be able to save this data, whether it's on a flat file on your hard disk or within what we call a relational database that allows me to query the data out of it.
Right.
And so there is a really cool embeddable relational database called SQLite, which you can actually get if you actually go to the famous NuGet packages, and you can actually type in SQLite.net. And it will allow you to actually embed a SQLite database. So the database will actually look like, it'll actually save it in your local app data. So you notice this is my local app data folder. There should be a TWIT folder that it'll create. And if I go jump in here, Santa's Little Helper version 1, you'll see an actual product SQL.lite DB file. And so this is actually real tiny. It's only 3 kilobytes. It's got maybe 100 items in it right now. But it'll basically create an embeddable database for you, and all you have to do is add this project to it.
And also, I'd like to say, if you want to know more about NuGet, I believe you check out episode 39 and 40 of Coding 101. It's the last C# module. It's a fantastic tool that allows you to bring in things like this new repository. Also, remember that the code that we're showing you gets that blob. Remember that JSON blob that we were talking about? And you have a utility linked in the last episode of Coding 101 that will let you turn that JSON blob into unique fields, which will then be put into this database that Lou is now showing you how to set up.
Exactly right. So let's go ahead and do that. I mean, let's demo it really quick. I'll go ahead and put a breakpoint here. Let's do like another Newegg one really fast. So we'll stick one right here. And I do like kind of stepping through things. So I'll go ahead and hit go, and here it hits the Newegg provider because I copy and pasted a Newegg URL. And if I step into that, it'll actually step in and say, give me the price. And so it'll go and retrieve the price internally. Let me zoom in here so you guys can see. And then the blob that you're going to get is the last thing that gets back here. Hold on 1 second. I'll get down there. So we get all the way down to the bottom and make the call here, and the response should come back.
There it is.
And the response was successful. And then if we look inside here, there's this big blob of JSON that gets come back, right? Let me pull it over here. There you go.
Right. And that's,
So
we can parse that. Exactly. So this is the blob. This is the JSON blob. We parse this so we can pull out the individual fields so that we can compare data against other JSON blobs.
That's right. So what I normally do is, I think what we showed last time is I use what we call the JSON serializer, and what it can do is it can create actually what we call strongly typed objects, and that would mean that I could create an object, and then I can kind of pull the information off of it without having to go and do any additional work on it. And so you notice in here I have this new object called search result, and if I can look inside, I see that it has a bunch of properties, and this might be a little small for everybody, but what you can see is I can get product details and keep drilling down until, boom, I finally find the price. And so this way I don't have to kind of sift through that entire string and use a bunch of regular expressions or whatever to kind of sift through the data. I can just use .NET and its object providers to basically get the data off of it.
Nice. Nice.
So now what we want to do is we want to save this data. So I'm going to return this back. I'm going to pop back out to the provider code that I had here. And
Actually, before you do that, do you have a way to bring up the JSON file after it's been parsed? Because that's always a nice before and after. So they've seen the blob.
So to be honest with you, there's the serializer. What it does is it does it at a binary level. So what it'll do is there's not much I can actually pull up.
There is. It just wouldn't look like anything.
It wouldn't look like anything, right? Yeah. So what it'll do is it'll just match. It'll do a bunch of hash set matchings, and it'll basically convert that to an object rather than just show you a big blob. That's basically what it's doing.
Nice.
So basically what I did was then I returned this retail product object, and that retail product object is something that I created a while ago, and it has a bunch of properties on it like title and price and image, and that's common amongst all the retailers. So I created this so that this way I can kind of bind to that later, and so that's what I'm returning in all of the different provider codes. So this Newegg one is going to return this price object. If I look inside, you'll notice that it has the 4K television that I asked for. Newegg's ID, of course, it came from Newegg, and then of course the price that they have for it right now.
Nice.
So I'm going to pop that back out. So now this is what we call my item search view model. And so when you're writing a UI, we talked about this in one of the later past episodes. We talked about the MVVM framework concept, where you have a model, which is where you get your data, your view model, which you basically take the data from the model and hook it up to your view or your UI. And so this is what we call our item search view model. This is how I'm going to get the data from the provider, which is my model, and then I'm going to present it to the user, to the UI somehow.
Right. And of course, that's only possible because you've already worked with the JSON file to turn it into usable data. Because you can't present the blob. It won't look like anything. But now that we've serialized it, you could pull specific fields that are actually useful, like name of product and price and vendor.
And honestly, that's the bulk of the work. Now, I'm not going to pretend to be the best UI person. That UIs could take me maybe months to get it correct. But the bulk of the logic, the complexity of the logic is really in getting that data from these providers. And so once you have that, which we do, we have this, and I have this retail product that has all the data in it. Now I need to know how I'm going to present that to usefully to the user. And how am I going to save that so that when I later open the app, how can I see the historical if I've already saved that item once before?
Right.
So that's what we got to go into next, is how we want to save that data so we can look at it what we had from once before.
Exactly, because if you can't expect to pull all this data every single time you make a query. You want some way to store it all locally in a fashion that makes sense. So of course you're going to store it in.
Right. So we're storing in a database.
There we go.
So we create a wrapper class, what I like to call retail product storage. And what it does is, if you look inside here, the first thing it's going to do is called load database. And it's got some code in here, but luckily SQLite.net has a really good documentation. But all you're really doing is creating a connection to the database. I'm using my local storage path, and that was that path that I showed you here that's within my, this is my username, and then of course my app data local. And this is just something, if you're on a Windows machine, it will be available for all users that log in. It's the app local data storage, and it's only available to you as a user, that nobody else can access that unless you're an admin. And so I'm just using that path, and then I'm just calling this, this is the name of the SQL database. And then I create a connection, and once I create this connection, boom, the database gets created. And then I have to create this table. And so this is the hard part, because if you're not really familiar with databases, it might be difficult to create tables. But there is a workaround. There's always tools for everything. And there's a really cool tool called the SQLite Toolbox. And it's this really neat UI that allows you to basically build a table just by using a UI. It's kind of like building an Excel spreadsheet. And you can build a table, and like I have ID, I could put retail ID, I could put title, and this could be text, and I could just basically build up a table here, and then I can hit save or script, and it will actually generate a script for me. Whoops, probably doesn't like this. Yeah. And then once I hit the script button, it'll generate a script, and then this is what the script that'll actually generate for you is this create table script. And you notice inside here I have the retail unique ID, the ID of the item, the retailer, like Amazon, the image of the item, product URL type, when was it created, the date and time, and when it was modified.
That's very. Wait, is that part of the plugin, or is that part of the visual environment itself?
That's part of the plugin. So the plugin will allow you to basically create the script, and then you just copy and paste the script from the tool into your code.
Nice.
Really simple, yeah. And it'll actually create the table for you. So once you see I'm connected to the SQLite database here, and I notice I actually have retail products table here. And then, of course, here are all the different columns in that table. And I can actually right-click and go select, and now I can actually query that table. So if I execute this, you notice now I have a result of this Newegg item that got put in there.
Nice.
So fairly simple, and there's tools to do it, so you don't have to actually know how to write SQL code or how to write T-SQL code or whatever to do it, and it will create the table for you.
Okay, so this is creating the table based on what we're receiving from the JSON blobs after they've been serialized. But how do we then push the data into the tables that we've just created?
Good question. So now, again, we're going to use the same tool, and I'm going to go right-click on it and go select script as insert. And so what it's going to do here is it's going to generate a script that, which I can't zoom on, so I apologize for how small it is. But it's generating a script for me. You notice it has an insert statement here that then has a bunch of values. And so here's the key here is we need to basically erase this, and we're going to put in these placeholders, what I like to put in for SQLite, SQL.net, you put in placeholders. So P1 is the parameter for the unique ID, P2 would be the ID, and so on and so forth. And you just keep replacing it with a bunch of placeholders for the parameters. And then you copy and paste this back over here, and we'll go up to my retail product storage. And I put in a save product method, and then here's my insert. This is what I copy and pasted over. And you'll notice that I just replaced those parameters with a bunch of placeholders.
Now, we've got a couple of people in the chat room who are freaking out. They're like, wait a minute, we haven't covered databases yet. We know we're not doing a thorough tutorial on database management just yet.
No.
Just take the code as it is. We know this is, remember, we always want to leave you, at the end of every module, we want to leave you a little challenge. This is the challenge. You're going to have it working. The code will actually work. And then you can play around so that you can figure out exactly how the database functions work. This is just simply a place to put the data that we've been pulling from the websites in that JSON blob, serializing, and then storing so that we can compare them against other values. That's all we're doing. Just think of it as that, and think of the code as sort of a black box at the moment. It'll get clearer. Yes, right. Lou is now melting faces. Thank you, Lou.
Face melting off. Yeah, we don't want your face to melt off.
All right, continue the face melting.
All right. So basically all we're doing then thereafter is we're taking these placeholders, what we call tokens, and we're basically using this special command object that you get with SQL.net. It's called the SQLite.command, and it lets you to put in the script that you want to insert with, and then it allows you to use what they call a command builder, and you basically bind the parameter to the data. And so you notice here that my property that I'm sending in here to this method is called product. And again, it's my retail product that has, all the different properties of retail product. And then I'm just binding the data that gets sent in to the parameters. Fairly straightforward once you get the hang of it. And then last thing I'm doing is executing the query and committing it to the database. And that's all you have to do to save it off to make sure that you have it for later.
Yeah. And of course, the reason why we're doing it this way, because I can already hear the wheels turning of people saying, well, if it's just a bunch of values, why don't I just set up a bunch of variables to store the values? We want to make it easier. We want to make the functionality easier as we go into the view part of the programming. Because remember, just presenting the data is useless. We want to be able to compare, and databases are fantastic at comparing.
And also, if you save everything in memory, once you shut the app down, it's gone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so, and then another thing is a lot of people say, well, why don't you save it in a flat file, like a text file or something? Well, just think, over a year, how many products do you look at? Do you track a lot of products? It could be thousands of products. And that means that now you have to parse this text file for all 1,000 products every time you load the app up. And when you parse the text file, sometimes you have to do it in memory. And so now you have a memory problem. It just gets to be old.
Yeah.
So the better thing to do is to save it in some kind of data storage mechanism that you can stream from it or query from it, and that's where the database comes in.
The way we look at it, yes, it's more complicated, but you can either kludge together a way to store the data, or you can store it into a framework that's designed to store data. And one is clearly better than the other, even though it does take more effort.
That's right. So now, I guess once we store it off, we can basically decide on, whether we want to store it and then also how we want to present it to the user. So the next thing I want to do is determine how I want to present it to the user. So what I started to do was I built what we call a product search control. And what this is just think of a list box with a whole bunch of products in it. And this is just a placeholder image right now, but it'll actually have different components to it. It'll have a placeholder image, and then it'll have the price over here, and then the minimum price of the item, the title of the item, and what retailer it came from. And so this way, this will be a big list, and it'll have an image of the item, and it'll basically be able to tell me, what the price has been, what it is right now, and what it's been. And so then I basically just built a very simple XAML control that can do that. If I actually minimize all this, you can see the XAML code is it's only 15 lines long. And so I basically created a line item that will have an image of the item and then all the information for it.
Right. And if any of you are freaking out with this, take a look at Coding 101 Modules 1 and Modules 4, because we actually look at this design. Essentially, we've already written all the code. We've got all the features baked into the bottom. We're just going to copy and paste. We're going to drop in our little items so that they can trigger actions.
Right. So there's also a lot of code backing this too. So like, for instance, I have a product search view model that has the image and the minimum price. And these are all properties that, again, I think we talked about this in one of the later episodes that talk about the auto-notified property change event, which means that anything that changes in the view model, it will basically go and fire an event to the UI to go get the new data. And then it'll go and update that data. So this is the UI is now bound to this special view model that I've created. And again, it has these properties in here.
Now, Lou, before we're heading into the home stretch here. We're going to start talking about how we're going to create the binding so that we have nice two-way bidirectional control of the data that we're presenting to the user. But before we do that, let's go ahead and take a break to talk about the second sponsor of this episode of Coding 101. And it's Mandrill. Now, what is Mandrill, you might ask yourself? Well, if you are in a small to medium business, if you're in an enterprise, well, you want an infrastructure service that's trusted by the industry. That's what Mandrill is. It's an easy to integrate, scalable, reliable, secure email infrastructure service that's trusted by more than 300,000 customers. You get to integrate, deliver, track, and analyze your emails as they move through your system. And Mandrill gives you detailed delivery reports, advanced analytics, and a friendly interface that means your entire team, from developers to marketers, can monitor and evaluate your email performance. With servers all over the world, Mandrill can deliver your email in seconds. And not only that, but they've got multiple ways to deliver your messages so that you're always making sure that your messages get out in a timely manner. You don't have a lot of stuff that gets queued up and sent out hours, days, even weeks later, but Mandrill will make sure that your message gets out when you intend it to. Mandrill started as an idea back in 2010. But they're growing fast and they're innovating faster. Mandrill is now the largest email as a service platform on the market. You can use Mandrill to send automated one-to-one emails like password resets and welcome messages, as well as marketing emails and customized newsletters. Mandrill made it for developers, and developers love documentation. And Mandrill definitely gives those developers the documentation that they need for easy integration, for high delivery rates, and all the webhooks that they need to make sure that it's going to work with your existing software. It comes with a beautiful interface, flexible template options, custom tagging, and advanced tracking and reports. Mandrill is the only email infrastructure service with a mobile app that lets you monitor delivery and troubleshoot from wherever you are. Now, it's powerful and scalable and affordable, and we know this because we've actually used Mandrill, but you don't have to take our word for it. Right now, Mandrill is offering the TWiT audience a special deal. Sign up at mandrill.com, promo code TWiT, and you'll receive 50,000 free email sends per month for your first 6 months of service. That's mandrill.com, promo code TWiT. Mandrill.com, promo code TWiT. And we thank Mandrill for their support of Coding 101. Lou, take us home. We've got the data. We've got it in a database. How is it going to look?
Let's show it. Let's show the user data. So the first thing we have to do is we need to bind the data that we got to the UI. And so what you have to do, and I think we talked about this before, is you have to set up a Windows resource to do that by using a view model mechanism. And so the view model mechanism is you just use a Windows resource, and again, there's some documentation on this online. But all you do is set up a data source or a static source for it. And then what I can do down here then is I can look at it. Every time I want to bind, let's say I want to bind the text box, or I want to bind, let's look at the text box really quick. So I want to bind the actual text box content to my URL. And so if you look over here, the binding says the text of the text box binds to my URL text property. And if I pop over here to the view model, I have a URL text property. There it is, magical property. And I basically bind that view model to it. So pop back over here, and so I bind it, and I do it in a two-way, meaning that if something changes in code, it will update the UI, and if something changes in the UI, it will update in the code. And so that's kind of the key here is basically all I'm doing is setting up the binding. And now the coolest thing behind this, though, is I'm going to show you something neat. Look at the code behind for this file. That's it.
We love this. We love this. So this is your super advanced program. This is what it would look like. And everything's basically just includes.
Missing. Exactly right. Love it. So and this is what we call declarative programming. This means that we declare everything in the UI, we bind it to a view model, and it's kind of a disconnected environment.
Yes.
So let's see what it shows us. So let's see what we can see here. So
moment of truth.
Moment of truth, right? So let's boot her up. And again, this might be a little small because I can't zoom on these guys.
Well, haven't you fixed that in the UI yet? No, we'll do it on our side. Don't worry.
Yeah, we'll do it on our side. We'll do the DPI change. So I used what we call, let's see if I can, So let's say in a little helper, right? And you got a little URL box here, and I can basically paste in a URL. And if we go, I'll put a little breakpoint in here so we can kind of see what's going on underneath the covers. So I'll go to the item search. There's a breakpoint there already. So we'll pop back over. So I'm going to hit the search button, and boom. So now you notice that the URL text right now is the URL that I put in the text box. And now it says, okay, now go find the retail. So I'm using the current code that I already have to go and search. Boom, I get the provider, retail, boom, calls out to the service. Should return in a second, depending on how slow it is.
Right,
did it return? There it is.
All right.
And then is it going to save it to the database first? Yes, it'll save it to the database. Now it's saved. And then we should see a line item in the UI. Oh, we don't. But could be a binding problem that I have. Again, this is one of the later releases that I had. But basically what you should see is you'll see this search control right here with the image and then the title and the actual description of the item. So that's what normally will happen. But at least we can go look at the database really quick just to see if it showed up in there.
Right. And this is a simple part. This is just making the items from the database appear in the view, and it's just not bound properly at the moment.
I mean, it's just bound correctly. But yeah, instead of playing with it, we could just show you where the data is right here. So just to make sure it worked, and there it is. So there's the second line item, Samsung 40-inch television. Boom, it's in there. And so now it's storing the data. So now if I were to shut the app down, close the app, and then restart it, I can basically just pull the data directly from the database rather than having to go and call the Newegg service again and then get in trouble for calling them too much.
That's fantastic. That's absolutely fantastic. And as you go, you can build up the database of items and prices and descriptions inside your Santa's Little Helper database. I mean, this is the whole idea. Over time, you will gradually work up the inventory of products that you would like to keep an eye on.
Right. I mean, talk about scope creep. I guess the idea that I had was I would show you this really neat line graph of like the trending of that item, and then I mean, there could be a whole bunch of things I could do for you. But again, I wanted to give you a framework on really how to the basic concepts of how to bind to things, how to set up the UI, and how to do list items, how to do SQLite database, how to actually call the complex services. And then you can always add features after that on top of it.
Right. Well, Lou, how about this? The code is done. I mean, this will work as it is, as we just have to bind it. What if we were to bring you back for one more episode, and let's just take what we've got and make it pretty?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do that. Fantastic.
I'll have to pull in a designer to help me, though. I might have to
that's the thing. I'm horrible at UI design. Like I'm fine with just a couple of boxes, and then someone else will come in and say, no, you have to have this bigger than this, and this should be a different color, and then it does look beautiful, and you get that nice synergy of the creative mind and the programming mind and everything in between. Lou Maresca, Senior Software Engineer with Microsoft. We want to thank you so very much. Your example will be available. People can click on the link and download all the assets. So again, if you don't understand what we were talking about, get the asset file and scroll through it. Be with us as Lou is taking you through the program, because then it makes a lot more sense. Also, if you do understand what we're doing and you understand that this is just a binding problem, why not give us examples of what you do with Santa's Little Helper and make sure it ends up on our Google Plus page, which we'll talk about in just a bit. But Lou, first, could you please tell the folks at home where they can find you, where they can find your work, and where they can find Lou Maresca in the real world?
You bet. So, of course, LouMM on Twitter, and of course, LouMM on About Me, and of course, all my work that I've been working on tirelessly, which is why I was actually late today, is on crm.dynamics.com, and check it out. We're coming out with some really cool things in the next coming months.
Fantastic. Lou Maresca, it is always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so very much for being part of Coding 101. You, sir, are a master, a code warrior.
Thank you for having me, Padre. Appreciate it. Love it.
Now, don't forget, folks, that you can always get the notes for all of our episodes at our show page. Just go to twit.tv/C101, twit.tv/code. I'm just having issues today. Not only will you be able to find all of our episodes, and this is important if you want to get the references from the earlier modules, but you'll also find a way to get all of our episodes automatically onto your device of choice. Also, you need to join our Google Plus group. It's where you're going to get your questions answered. Go to plus.google.com/twitcoding101. There you'll be able to join the community, answer questions if you're an expert, and make sure everything works just fine. Also, you can find me on Twitter at twitter.com/PadreSJ. That's at PadreSJ. If you follow me, you'll find out what we're doing in every episode of Coding 101, as well as what I do when I'm not here on the Twit TV network, or when I'm doing the other shows I do on the Twit TV network, or when I'm playing with corgis. Don't forget that we do our show live every Thursday at 1:30 p.m. Pacific time. You can find us at live.twit.tv, and you can also join our chat room at irc.twit.tv, and I'll actually answer your questions. I'll pull people from the chat room as the show goes on. I want to thank everyone here at the Brick House who makes this show possible, of course, to Leo and to Lisa, but also to my super duper fantastic Mr. Macho creative guy, TD, Mr. Brian Burnett.
Man, what a toss.
Did I pay you enough for that one?
No, that was good. That was good. Man, there's
Brian, can you tell
that.
them where they can find you on the Twit TV network?
You can find me doing Know-How earlier with you on Thursdays, 11 o'clock Pacific time. And I think I have a little example right here. Quadcopters. And this is my new baby.
This is your baby.
The quad, what do you call it? The Quadmillion?
The Quadlenium Falcon.
Hey there, Padre. How'd you get back there?
I'm squishing.
So yeah, check out Know-How if you're, and also follow me on Twitter at cranky_hippo. Good job today, Padre.
You too. Folks, thank you very much for watching. I'm Father Robert Ballecer, the Digital Jesuit. End of line.